we're probably going to have a lot of the cancer solved.
There's never been a better time to get cancer.
I think where we're at today in the development of gene therapy in history, really, like you said, very, very early innings, right? And what we're really going after right now are the really serious genetic diseases, right? I think we'll have it all solved in the next 10, 15 years as long as the science keeps pushing forward.
You hear about, especially with the anti-vaxxer movement, that whatever you've taken is permanent, and all of a sudden your genome has changed forever. So is that false?
Well, I mean, it's a complicated question.
Welcome to Longevity Unpacked, the Cell and Gene Therapy special. Matt Scholz is the founder of Ocean Technologies, which is pioneering genetic therapies to target the root causes of aging. And Yuta Lee is the founder of Accelerated Bio, which is advancing cell therapies that could radically extend healthy human life. What is the one thing that you feel could go absolutely wrong?
I mean,
The future of longevity is being shaped in Geneva this October. The Global Longevity Summit is an intimate gathering at the Genolia Innovation Hub, running from October the 28th to the 30th, with pioneers like Aubrey de Grey, Matt Scholz, and Amy Killen. I am grateful to be joining as an advisor. And if you would like to be there too, you can get 10% off tickets with the code BEYONDTOMORROW. Just check the description for the link. I'll see you there. Could you explain to our listeners the difference between cell and gene therapy?
Yeah.
It's interesting because they get put together.
They do.
They're different, of course.
That's
Could you
right.
explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So with cell therapies, you're actually taking cells and utilizing their functions to fix something that's gone wrong in your body.
Okay.
Now, you can do that in two different ways. You can do an autologous therapy, which means that you're taking a cell from your own body, engineering it on the outside, and then putting it back in. Or you can do an allogeneic therapy, which is using a healthy donor cells, fixing or engineering it, and then putting it in your body. Okay. So there's a main difference between the two. With autologous, you don't have to deal with the immune system issues because they're from your own body. So your immune system is going to see it and, hey, it's ours. Don't worry about that, right? Unfortunately, you can't scale with that. It's always an n=1. You take it out, you engineer it, you put it back in. So it takes a long time to do that. With allogeneics, you can take a healthy donor that's been checked for diseases, checked for medical backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. And you can engineer something, but then you can allow everybody to use it. But you have to overcome the immune system issue. And so you have to get a cell that is immune privileged so that everybody can use it. Otherwise, if you put that in your body, you'll either have a rejection or a reaction to it that's actually very bad for you sometimes, right? But the best part about that is now you can scale. With autologous therapies, that's what hospital systems really love to do because that's what they do, one-on-one. Patient comes in, doctor takes care of them, they leave. But with allogeneic therapies, that's what biotechs and pharmaceutical companies love to do because they can mass manufacture it. Price comes down and they can just give it to any patient that comes in. Yeah. Right. So from a cell therapy standpoint, those are the two main categories that you can work in. And I'll let Matt explain the gene therapy part. Would that be all right?
Perfect.
Where do we start? I suppose it's probably useful to think about also how gene therapies are broken down, because I think a lot of people hear them and they immediately shudder, and I'm not sure exactly what comes to mind, but they think of, I guess, a GMO organism or a zombie apocalypse or something like that. And it's worth considering that you have on one end where you do modify an entire organism. You've changed like as an embryo, and so every cell in its body is now different. Either you added a gene or you took a gene away, and then to the other end of it, where you could put DNA into a cell that never goes into your genome at all. That it's just there like kind of like a computer program in RAM memory. When it resets, it's lost. And
so you can just explain this. There's two things there. There's one that literally recodes you and one that doesn't, right?
Yeah. Okay. And I guess people get weirded out about DNA unnecessarily, in that, like, if you eat a carrot, you're putting a lot of foreign DNA into your body, right? DNA is everywhere, but it doesn't do anything. You have to properly get it into the cell, into the nucleus before anything can happen. But and on this extreme end, which is not done in humans for the most part, outside of a few babies in China, where you change like the whole organism, a germline edit, as they call it. Most of the gene therapies that have been done for cancer, if you think of like the CAR T therapies or some of the engineered stem cell therapies or engineered bone marrow stem cell therapies. These put a gene into the genome, but it's only really in a small fraction of your cells. So if you got your genome sequenced for practical purposes, you wouldn't see that unless you happen to have taught one of those cells in particular. The bulk of your body is what it always was.
Can I just pause you just there? Okay, so because you mentioned that example of Chinese babies that I'm assuming is slightly in jest, but actually no, that we're talking about cloning or
no, the Chinese CRISPR'd some babies a few years back, and it was quite controversial, as you might imagine. And they basically knocked down a gene they said ostensibly was to make them resistant to HIV, but it was so far the only kind of published cases of making a germline edit in a human being.
Germline edits.
Yeah, so germline basically means that, like, if you have kids, that edit will go with them. Like, it's every part of your body has it. So it's from basically the progenitor cells of a human.
Because what I'm hearing is like 3 different kind of, let's say, like levels of risk. So you've got, okay, I eat a banana that has, I don't know what percentage of DNA similar to me, but it's not going to affect me negatively if I'm eating it. It's going to affect me positively. And then you have these 2 next levels. So you've got gene editing in a specific area of the body or specific cells within the body. Okay. What are the risk factors there? And can you give me an example of maybe something that is in market that does that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I think most people would be familiar with are the CAR T therapies for cancer. So they're a kind of immune therapy where they take out some of your T cells, they change their DNA, basically program them to attack cancer, and then put them back.
And a T cell is what? It's
a kind of immune cell. So if you think of your immune system can be sliced and diced a lot of ways, and it's quite a rabbit hole. But one big chunk of it is your adaptive immune system, the part that remembers things, that would respond if you got a vaccine, for example. And if you break that up, one part of it are like roving killers. They read 3D barcodes on cells and inject them with poison if they misbehave. And the other makes antibodies. And so the T cells are the ones that blow up other cells. And those are the ones that were being modified for the purposes of treating cancer.
I always think of T cells as like the SWAT team of your immune system, right? So, we have foreign pathogens that are trying to get into our bodies and kill us all the time, right? And so you have your normal roaming kind of like police force, these natural killer cells that will latch onto these bad guys and kill them, right? Or get rid of them. But then you have your T cells that they're kind of like the SWAT team. So if something really bad gets in your body, what it does is it tries to, you have these antigen presenting cells like macrophages that will chew up the bad guy, then present the ID literally to these T cells. And they're called T cells because they're trained in the thymus. And these guys will then pick up the ID and go, oh, now we know who to kill. Then they proliferate and make thousands or, hundreds of millions of these cells. And then they go around roaming around saying, hey, if you see this, kill it.
It's pretty cool how they work, really. Like, you think a cell is relatively very large and a virus is very small. Right. And so how does your body know if a virus is inside a cell, right? It's this itty bitty thing. And one way your body solved this problem was that it has like a 3-dimensional barcode on the surface of these cells that represents what is being made inside. And that should just be stuff that's you. And if something different shows up in that, like pieces of a virus, the T cells can read it on the surface of the cell and they say that shouldn't be there. And so they will kill it and they can develop a memory about it.
Has the technology been safe to administer so far?
Not really. I mean,
Relative to others, I would say yes.
Yeah. So I guess that's a really good point. Like if it were me, I would take a CAR T cell therapy over chemo any day of the week.
Agreed.
But they're a massive step forward. And so I don't want to be glib about that by any stretch. But they're in some respects an elective autoimmune disease. Like you've programmed this cell to kill something that otherwise it would think is you. And because cancer is you, basically. It's running amok, but it's still your cells. And so when you build these CAR T cells and say, go attack that cell now, they're going to take out cells that are not cancer also.
Gotcha. Okay.
And they divide exponentially. So when you put them in your body, they're going to divide over and over and over until there's no target left, basically.
This is really interesting. I think this is why people get a bit spooked out by gene therapy. For me, when I think of gene therapy, and I think for a lot of people, they get a bit spooked out at this idea, which I don't think you have as badly with stem cells, and why, to the most part, stem cells and gene therapy in slightly different phases of growth, let's just say. So CAR T, you wouldn't take CAR T. No, you would take CAR T.
Yeah, 100% take it.
I would. Yeah. I mean, CAR T therapies, as of right now, the really big downside is what they call cytokine release syndrome, or CRS. And that happens to about 6% of the population. But when you're facing death, 6%, that's not bad. That's pretty good. So, and I think when they average out all the remission rates, it's like over 76%, sometimes higher than 90 in many cases. Now, we're looking at different types of blood cancers or leukemias, right? But the odds are actually pretty good relative to just dying, right? Yeah. But so I think that's why CAR T therapies, which is actually partially gene therapy, partially cell therapy, right?
Can you explain that? Why it's
right. So what you're really doing is when a leukemia patient shows up as diagnosed, you're taking a T cell from the blood, right? You're also validating that they have the tumor cell in their blood system, or the leukemia, right? And that it expresses a surface marker called CD19, okay? And what you're doing is you're taking a plasmid, or you're engineering in an anti-CD19, and you're plugging it into the T cell. Right? And the reason why you want to do that is something that Matt said before. These tumor cells are your own. So your immune cells look at them and say, oh, that's ours. Don't worry about it. And they fly right by, right? And so what you're actively doing is saying, well, let's get the T cells to now recognize the bad tumor cells. So how do we do that? We can gene engineer in an anti-CD19, then grow a large population of this ex vivo, means outside of the body, then inject the whole thing back into your blood system. And it will literally go through your entire system, and every time it sees CD19, it grabs onto it and kills it. And that's how it's been so successful over the last about 10 years or so. It's been incredible. I think the first case was out of UPenn in 2013, and the first product was approved by the FDA in 2017. Yeah. So that was very, very exciting. So I think it's made huge strides into cancer. Unfortunately, a lot of the solid tumors have been not very successful with the same CAR T therapies, but they're trying to fix that with many things. But at least in blood cancer, we're making strides. And blood cancer accounts for probably 10% of all the cancers around the world. So the biggest part is still unsolved, the 90% solid tumors. So we're working on it.
Yeah, we had Dr. William Lai on the podcast recently, and we went very deep on immunotherapy, and just what is happening now in cancer is just, it makes a lot of us emotional, just the progress that's been made. And it's so interesting to hear these different therapeutics, how they're married together to move the needle forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I'm a very big optimist. So I actually believe in the next 15, 20 years, we're probably going to have a lot of the cancer solved.
There's never been a better time to get cancer. I think it's one of the honest things that you could ever say. And my hope is always that, 50 years from now, we'll look at these things as being as barbaric as we looked at the first generation of chemotherapies now, and that this progress continues. But they are remarkable. I mean, they took cancers that were a death sentence and wiped them out in many people. It's actually a a really significant improvement. And I think this is I guess back to your earlier question about like, are things safe or are they not? Like in general, you have to consider the risk reward trade-off for these things. Cancer therapies always involve killing lots of cells. And so it's kind of part and parcel to the course. But the genetic component of it is not, particularly dangerous. And I think another interesting example just to look at in classes of gene-modified cell therapies are basically the first one that I'd built with Immunotherapy. So this modified B cells, a different kind of immune cell. And instead of programming them to kill something, we programmed them to build something. So they became little drug factories. And so here you had a gene-modified cell therapy that we are trying to build effectively an app store for the human body. So instead of injecting a drug, you could program your body to make the drug inside of you. And
how does that even happen? Like, how is it just feels kind of crazy. It's like, what does that process look like?
So there, in this case, the B cells are the ones that normally make antibodies, and you have a bunch of specialized mature ones called long-lived plasma cells, and these are just magnificent producers of protein. Like a fully mature one can produce between 10 and 100,000 antibodies every second, and you've got something like 10 to the 10th of them. So they make enough antibodies that if you like spun your blood, you could see them. There's a ton of them, and so they are responsible for garbage cleanup, fighting viruses, all sorts of fun stuff. They're everywhere, and so we could basically take that machinery and give it a new code. Say, hey, make something else instead of what the antibody you're normally making. And in the case of the one that went into human trials for that, it was making an enzyme that we all have, but some people are born without. And if you're missing it, it's lethal. And so you'd have to take this enzyme once a week for a multi-hour infusion and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this thing and try to like replace what's missing. And so this therapy basically gives your body back the instructions it needs to make it. And it just takes advantage of the fact that they're good at making stuff. Mm. And so it's, I think just illustrates how wide the spectrum of genetic medicines can be. Like, whereas a CAR T therapy is out to kill things, this isn't doing any such thing at all. It just sits there and quietly makes its drug.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I would love to go back onto that, but I think first of all, trying to speak of the Chinese babies and just to understand what was going on there compared to, what's happening with CAR T or what you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think the controversy was with the germlines, right? So I think
what, sorry?
The germline. So
what's that?
Human beings, we have our naturally evolved DNA. Right, that we pass from generation to generation, right? And the editing of the DNA is a pretty recent phenomenon. And what we're trying not to do is insert something into our human DNA that's naturally evolved, that is foreign, that is unknown, so that it can affect future generations to no end. So I think that's the danger that ethically, as a human race, we're trying to prevent. Yeah. So if you take all brakes off, then all of a sudden people are, designing 2 heads onto a baby versus, 4 legs or whatnot. I mean, it gets a little crazy, right? So they're called chimeras. So we're trying to avoid all that. That's why there are a lot of laws in pretty much all the countries to prevent any germline modifications, right? And so, but this researcher in China did this and got into big trouble for it. So
what's interesting is I think, though, that in some respects, this is the future of humanity, that it's almost unavoidable to you have a brain like ours and opposable thumbs. Sooner or later, we're going to take control of our genetic fate.
I agree.
Although this, I think, rightly causes a lot of trepidation in the world, that because if you take a CAR T therapy, for example, you can't pass that to your kids. It dies with you. The germline modification can go off into the wild. It's created a modified human, and this worries people, and I think rightly so. But it also, I think, is likely where we're going. And for all of our history, we've just been guided by pressures that cause us to change DNA one way or the other. And if you were to look back at time, you'll see changes that are as the species has evolved. But going forward, we're going to be able to look at it and say, okay, how would you do it if you want to optimize it for some purpose? Because I mean, I think a good example, I guess, is a healthy man can go for about a month without eating. We're heavily optimized to avoid starvation because it killed lots and lots of people. That's why like eating sugar and getting fat isn't a bug, it's a feature. The idea was that in the summer you'd eat a lot of sugar and you'd get fat, so you'd survive for the winter. And now we have limitless sugar and all sorts of problems. But you think of the world and our environment has changed, and I think as we go forward, we think what is optimal. And I think at the heart of aging, really, and if you want to meaningfully impact, I think, human health span and lifespan, you're going to have to change the code. And you might not need to change the germline code, but sooner or later, we'll be understanding more and more about these things. And the ethical question will likely change. Instead of saying, like, you shouldn't do this because, it will have these consequences, the question will be like, how could you bring someone into the world with a known flaw? Like, how could you let this bug persist, knowing that it will cause untold suffering and early death? Like, why did you choose to leave it? And I think that's something that we're not at this today, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to look at how these tools are going and think that is going to be very much the question in a few years. Like, what would be ethical to leave alone?
Right. So with the germline, just to say, it can only be done before someone is born? Is that an embryo?
Yeah, for practical purposes. You could engineer a sperm or an egg and then try to like breed it in, basically. But it always will start with an embryo with that modification.
So I can't today be like, hey, I just really want to stop my sugar cravings. There's nothing they can. I can't have that gene edited.
Well, you could.
Eventually.
No, so you don't need to change every cell in your body to deal with your sugar cravings. And this is, I think, an important distinction that most the genetic medicines that exist modify a relatively small percentage of your cells, but they're still very effective. And so it's about modifying the right cells. And yeah, if you have a child, it won't be passed on. And that's viewed as a good thing, I think, widely now. But or
having the midnight erections of Brian Johnson. Is that something else I could GMO myself too?
So we've got an app for that, Yeah, I mean, this becomes an interesting question. Yeah, like if you had the tool to upgrade your source code or modify your source code, the sky's the limit, basically. You can change all sorts of things. And in general, for practical purposes, every, cell in your body has the same genome. When you make these modifications with normal gene therapies, you're changing a small percentage of them, but you can have an outsized effect if you change the cells, the right cells in the right place. And that's kind of and they don't even necessarily need to be permanent for that matter. You could make something that's quite durable, but actually doesn't change your genome at all.
If you look more optimistically, what's happening with us now. I mean, we're planning on sending people to Mars, right? So you can imagine then somehow tweaking your own DNA so that you become more resistant to UV radiation. So you can actually make that trip without harming yourself or killing you, right? And you have to live on a completely different planet. That's gonna take a lot of changes, right? And so the human evolution doesn't move fast enough for you to do that. So now we have a window and a potential tool to make that happen in a very short amount of time. Now, given we still have to figure out a lot of the science and a lot of the engineering, but at least we're on our way. And that's why I'm so optimistic about gene therapy in general.
So at the moment, you've got gene therapy, there's a few use cases. And so gene therapy has generally been used in cases where, let's say, the individual has a very pressing need.
Right.
For example, with cancer or muscular dystrophy, but when it comes to longevity, only 300 or just over 300 people have taken gene therapy for anti-aging purposes, right? And Liz Parrish being one of them, Boyang Wang as well being another person. Right now, the risk, unfortunately, there's too much risk. 2 deaths, I think it was 1 death or 3 deaths from a company recently that has developed gene therapy for muscular dystrophy. Like, where are we at? Are we like very much now in like the early innings? Like, would you take gene therapy for any purpose?
I think that if it was life-threatening, yes. Why not, right? And I think where we're at today in the development of gene therapy in history, really, like you said, very, very early innings, right? And what we're really going after right now are the really serious genetic diseases, right? So they come in two forms. Either something's mutated and you need to cut that out or replace it with a healthy one, or something that's missing in the first place. So some babies are born, missing a specific gene, then they won't be able to make proteins that's necessary for them to survive. So then you'll be able to now use this technology and go plug that in, right? So either taking away something bad or plugging in something that's necessary. And this is, I think, the first phase. Let's take care of these early low-hanging fruit problems. And there are many gene therapies going through the system now that will allow for this. Now, mostly monogenic diseases, meaning diseases that have one gene that went wrong, right? Yeah. We still are working on things where it's multi-gene. But it's early innings. I think we'll have it all solved in the next 10, 15 years as long as the science keeps pushing forward. And that requires funding. So, we really want investors to keep helping us with that.
Let's look a bit. Okay.
I think it's worth pushing on this a little bit. That in the last 5 years, something really drastic happened, something that nobody saw coming, and that's 300 million people got a gene therapy for an infection they didn't have, and so Utah's right. Like
that's the COVID vaccine.
Yeah,
right?
and to be,
it's only 300 million.
That's the best number I found. But
really? I thought it was like 5 billion.
No. So this is and that's important. So the mRNA based vaccines, things like Pfizer, Moderna, those kind of vaccines were very different than like the J&J, AstraZeneca, CanSino, Sputnik, and the difference is that those particular ones used a virus, an adenovirus, to deliver DNA for the vaccine, whereas the lipid nanoparticle ones were RNA. These two were actually quite a bit different, technically speaking. And an adenovirus is a straight up gene therapy. It's not an ambiguous thing, it's a DNA virus. It's quite literally a textbook gene therapy vector, one of the first ones used. And so if you had went a few years ago and said, I want to give a gene therapy to a healthy person, an elective gene therapy or anything like that, like you would have been booted out of FDA before your first meeting. Like that would have been a complete non-starter. Even the first one I built is a lethal rare disease, and it took a decade to get that into the clinic. And I don't think we should ignore this massive precedent. Like in the first month, those adenovirus vaccines were available, more humans got a gene therapy than in all of human history combined. And so now when you talk about, okay, well, I would take a gene therapy if I was dying. I mean, obviously, gene therapies are amazing, but that's not the precedent that was just set. The precedent that was just set was hundreds of millions of people who are perfectly healthy got a gene therapy. And I think that's going to kind of fundamentally change the game from like both the regulatory standpoint, the scale, the risk reward. You're looking at something that would have never happened before. And I don't think we're going to undo it. And so then the question is, how can this benefit us? And I think in some respects, from the longevity space, this could be what saves it. Like I said, I don't think we'll ever be able to cure aging with pills or meaningfully impact the human health span and lifespan. You're going to have to use more powerful tools like this. And that is a precedent that is, I think, going to impact the space for years to come.
So this is fascinating. 300 million people have had a gene therapy. So anyone that had an AstraZeneca or a Sputnik.
Yeah, J&J and CanSino, I think, were the other ones.
Okay, yeah. J&J. And so their genes or their genome has been changed forever.
Well, not their core genome. And this goes back to the very beginning here. Like you have the extreme end where all your cells are changed. And then you have like one step like the CAR T where the genome of some of your cells were changed. In the case of these vaccines, in theory, they weren't changing the genome, any of the cells. They were delivering DNA to those cells, but when the cell divided, it would be lost. So it's supposed to be a non-integrating vector. And likes the computer program in RAM memory kind of thing. The DNA it's in there, it's in the nucleus, it's being read, but the cell divides or dies, it's toast.
So, and this is why you'd need multiple of the vaccine or multiple doses, as in you'd go back for 2, 3. And so the idea that, because sometimes you hear about these, I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but like you hear about, especially with the anti-vaxxer movement, whatever you've taken is permanent, and all of a sudden your genome has changed forever. Is that false?
Well, I mean, it's a complicated question. There's certainly data that's published now showing that the persistence of this modified spike, the thing that they're making, lasted far longer than it should have if the cells did not have a permanent change to them. But I think that you have to go down the rabbit trail pretty far to look at the biology of that. It does seem, though, that at least in a decent chunk of the patients who received these, that they had persistent expression of this far longer than they should have. That likely some cells got modified in at least a very durable way, if not a permanent way. But it would still be a very small percentage of the cells in your body. Like this is less than you would have from, say, a CAR T therapy, I think, because you were injecting a relatively small amount of this vector.
With what you know now, would you take the vaccine again today?
I mean, the big issue with the vaccines in my mind, or like, and to be clear, I worked on one of these. So I think the issue, though, is risk and reward. So if it were Ebola, I would give me as many as you got, like
just both arms.
Yeah. And even, I mean, during COVID, like my grandma is like, we're going to march you up there. You're getting, first in line for this, because, you had a real threat to her health and life for it. I mean, in my case, personally, I caught COVID before there's a vaccine. So I had very little upside to taking these things again. And so I think this, if anything, was like, I think the big mistake that was made, that this, in many respects, could have been and should have been the crowning achievement of the biomedical space. Like, you had a disease that, had a real serious threat to at least some of the population, and went from nothing to a viable vaccine incredibly fast. Yeah. And that if it had been left at that, I think nobody would be all up in arms. It wouldn't be so controversial. Is that there wasn't, I think, really any assessment of risk and reward when it decided to make everybody take it. And so, like, I would certainly take these classes of vaccines. I think they're incredibly useful. It's just a question of what. And I mean, I do think there's an interesting thing to be considered. It goes a little bit maybe on a rabbit trail on immunology, but when you look at the LNP, the RNA ones in particular, they are making lots of protein in the liver. And I think there's a risk that you could tolerize yourself to a protein instead of eliciting a bad response if you kept doing it. And
what do you mean by tolerizing a protein?
Well, you think, I guess, really broadly speaking, covered, body likes things that are self, doesn't like things that are foreign. But it's on the horns of a dilemma in that everything you eat is foreign. And so you have lots of foreign things that are going into your body. And if it attacks everything you eat, then you won't live very long. And so your body has to have some way of recognizing a substance or a protein that is a foreign origin but non-harmful. And so it doesn't mount a response to try to destroy it. And I mean, a good example, I suppose, is you can find antibodies against like cow protein in lots of people. And it's because some of your hamburger finds its way into some immune cells, and it recognizes it as foreign, but at some point decides, we shouldn't attack it, but there's still antibodies that will bind to it if it's floating around. And so if you eating something or exposing yourself to something that was foreign at a fairly constant rate in some place that is prone to make you tolerant to it, like your mouth or your liver, your body might decide that thing should be left alone. And so kind of how like an allergy treatment works. If you have like a peanut allergy, you take a little bit more and more and more until your body hopefully ignores it. So if you are making lots of viral spike in your liver over and over, your body might decide that maybe it shouldn't be attacking viral spike anymore. And that's probably not the intended result. But it is something that was seen in people who started having like 3 and 4 and more of the mRNA vaccines in particular. Like they began to see their immune system begin to shift into more of a tolerogenic state.
This is all really interesting. So Minicircle, which has been making quite a lot of noise in the longevity space, they have a gene therapy that I think what one of their lines of gene therapy is what you're talking about, in the sense that you have it, but then it's not permanent, right? But then there are other gene therapies, I think from Liz Parrish, I think BioViva, which is permanent. So it's making lasting change. And something that Liz mentioned to me was that, it's the equivalent of someone taking peptides for the rest of their life. You take it once, and all of a sudden you've made that change, and you have the benefits of changing your genome, right? It's for me, it feels, even just talking about this, it makes me realize like how robust the science needs to be before we even start thinking about scaling this out. And you say it's the crowning achievement, the vaccine. Do you think it was released in haste, given the immediacy of the risk, or what we deemed to be the immediacy of what was happening?
This is something that it's a hard job for the regulators. And I mean, they do better and worse jobs of it, depending on the case. But if, on one hand, it's been said, the FDA doesn't care if you die from disease, they care if you die from a drug. And so there's of all the people who just die, that's not their problem. What happens is if a drug kills you, and that's, I don't know if it's an entirely fair assessment, but it's there's certain truth to it for sure. That they're not regulating diseases, they're regulating drugs, or labels more specifically, I guess. But and so when you had a novel kind of pathogen that's emerged, and it is killing somebody, like doing nothing will still cost lots of lives. And that's something that I think gets lost a lot, that inaction can be fatal. And that's true in the longevity space, and it's just more acutely true if there's a pathogen. And I mean, when this first emerged, I don't think anyone really knew if it was going to be more like SARS or MERS. And I think MERS had a really high mortality rate, and that would have been utterly disastrous if it turned out to be that nasty. And so the desire to push something forward really fast, I don't think was bad at all. I mean, that's the right move. The question then becomes, okay, well, how do you deploy it? Or who gets to say who has it, or who gets to say who has to have it? And that's like, if you take any of cancer treatments, for example, we know that most people will die from those things. You can't take chemotherapy forever. And a lot of times you're playing chicken with a bottle of poison in your tumor, and just seeing who gives up first. And so the question is not, is this thing inert or benign to the point that it won't hurt you? It's that, is it, given the circumstances, a good idea? And nobody in general forces you to take, chemotherapy or a CAR T cell therapy for that matter. You have a lot of, I think, personal agency in deciding what therapeutic course you want to take, even if that's nothing, even if it means I'd rather live the rest of my life without doing those things. And I think this is a key point that often gets missed, that, our agency defines us. If, I should be the arbiter of what goes into my body, not any other group or individual. And when you start taking that away from people is where it becomes a problem. It's not a problem about whether or not a treatment is good or bad for any purpose. It's I think more of your agency and be able to use it and choose to or not.
This is fascinating. Yuta, earlier you said that you would only take a gene therapy if you had something life-threatening.
Yes.
At what point does the gene therapy space advance fast enough for you to take a gene therapy for anti-aging purposes, as someone who believes in extending their life considerably?
Right. It's a great question. I actually think that I would personally resort to other types of therapies, like the ones that we're developing for our human trophoblast stem cells. And what we're doing is taking the earliest cells and capturing all of the secretome, or the proteins coming off of it, and trying to affect your body to systemically decrease all of the inflammation, for example. And as we all know today, a lot of the diseases that we have today are a result of chronic inflammation. And so, I would prefer to do that first and go in and start tweaking around with the hardware of our bodies. So yes, there I think, as Matt says, it's cost benefit. It's risk and reward, right? And as long as there are other methods to go forward, I would choose those before really making a hard change. It's kind of like getting a tattoo, right? So you get it stitched on, and it becomes really hard to reverse. So I would rather put a sticker on for the time being.
Bachelor party gone wrong,
There you go.
in Thailand or wherever.
Sharpie here.
Right, exactly.
So this is okay. I usually ask my guests to go into their crystal ball into 2030, but I want to go much further, because we have great therapies that are going to come to market that people will take to repair, maybe replace body parts. But eventually, we will get to a place where we can live indefinitely. And from this conversation, I feel then the next step will be significant gene alteration and GMO to make ourselves into genuine superhumans. And so where do you think this could potentially go?
Well, I can't wait.
I've got a long shopping list.
What's your first?
Need some upgrades here.
If gene therapy can do something that you believe it can do, what would be the first thing that you would get it to do? To fly?
Yeah, that'd be sweet. And this actually goes to a question of under what circumstances would one want to take a gene therapy? And obviously, if you want something very durable, they're useful for this. They can last a long time. They also can modify things inside of cells in ways that you can't do with a small molecule, a chemical, or even a biologic. But
can you go back and explain that? So what you're saying is a gene therapy literally will change something forever, whilst the drug is simply just an overnight thing, right? It's not going to...
Well, yeah, it can. I mean, the beauty of gene therapies don't have to actually be permanent. Like many of them are quite short-lived. But if you need something to be permanent, they have the ability to do that. And that's something you really can't do so much with a small molecule drug or traditional therapies. Yeah. But actually a good example of why one might want this is one of the first things we worked on were Senolytics. So we were trying to kill senescent cells, damaged cells in your body. And traditionally, the way people would kill those cells is with poisons, like chemotherapy. And humans have a long track record now at killing cells with poisons. And it's kind of an old trick. And so, but the problem is that poisons kill lots of things. And so there's collateral damage for it, just like there would be in cancer, although more benign. And but if you wanted to kill a cell without a drug, then gene therapy offers an interesting opportunity. So we wrote, like a computer program in DNA that said, if you're senescent, kill yourself. And then you inject the program. And the program goes into cells that are healthy and cells that are senescent, but it only will turn on in the ones that are senescent. And so then you can delete a cell with no collateral damage because there was no drug and there was no poison. It was just a computer program written in DNA. And that is the, kind of thing that would be difficult, if not impossible, to do with any other means. And so I think that people rush to this thing of like, would you take a gene therapy or not? I'm like, well, sure. But there has to be a good reason for it. If I could just take a pill and get the same benefit, probably not going to take a gene therapy for it. The question is, are you leveraging that technology to the full potential, or like, is there a reason you should be using this? And most of the gene therapies out there today are like that. Like in the case of the making the enzyme, you can take the enzyme for the rare disease I mentioned earlier, but the enzyme goes away very quickly. It's very expensive and it doesn't get everywhere it needs to go. And so if you now make your body produce it, you get a lot more benefit from it. It's the idea. And so I think it's worth always thinking about like, well, why am I doing this particular thing? Like if you can just, there's a lot of talk about making, GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic is gene therapies. And I think there's probably a patient population that could benefit from it. But, for me, if I want to lose a little bit of weight, I could just, take that shot for a little bit and I'll lose the weight and go about my business. You don't need to turn this thing on indefinitely. And so I think that's something that, it shouldn't get lost in the noise. I think gene therapies are a strange mix between like the most advanced kind of creation we have and natural medicine. And that like really in the end, it's your body making the therapy at this point. Like there's no more drug. And that's pretty remarkable and it carries a lot of benefits. But
when you think about that, it's very interesting because I get a lot of pushback in the comment sections on YouTube saying, well, this is for billionaires. And then why would a pharmaceutical company want to bring this like magic pill to market? Because then what would happen with all of our market? Right. But actually what I'm hearing is, first of all, you've got every single human being ages. And so you've got a total addressable market of 8 billion people. And then with this sort of gene therapy, if it's something that is not forever, but one thing that they have to top up on, you've then got potentially companies that could build, a $5 trillion, $10 trillion company from one gene therapy. If they're looking at senescent cells or whatever.
There's a point that shouldn't be lost in that, like, if you take the muscle building program working on IV treatment for frailty, I think that like if that works as expected in humans, that like the healthcare payers are going to be pressuring patients to take it, because the one thing that like doctors, patients, insurers, everyone agrees on is that want to live healthy for a long time and die fast. Like frailty is at the heart of all sorts of maladies and costs healthcare system a ton, costs you a ton, and a huge hit to quality of life. If you have this one example of these things, it makes someone stronger for longer, and it lasts, say, a decade roughly, if you take it, or 5 to 10 years. Everybody's going to want you to take it. It's not going to be at the purview of billionaires. This is going to be a thing that like they're going to be on your case to take it. Like, and because the economic benefit to everybody is so high. And I think that's...
that makes perfect sense. I think the key, the end goal is to democratize this. And we want to democratize the result, right? Now, the issue is there are a lot of different strategies towards this, right? So Matt is taking more of a gene therapy strategy. We're taking more of a cell therapy strategy. And, they could both work. And they could work for different parts of the population. We don't know. And so this is what the research will find out, and the clinical trials will help find out. And but the end goal is the same. Yeah. As Matt said, we are trying to get everybody to live healthier longer, because all the insurance systems around the world are going to be crashing around us if we don't. Because 200 years of these chemical drugs. It costs like $2 billion to get a drug through the system today. That's insane. And so, I think moving towards cell and gene therapy is a very natural evolution of our healthcare system. And these solutions that we're bringing onto the marketplace will actively solve the core cause of the problems, right? So that's what we're all aiming for. And, in this space now, there's so many different strategies. I think we should support them all, because we don't know which one's going to work, which one's going to get through, which one's going to be most efficient. So there are a lot of different strategies going towards the same issue. Like, for example, Matt was talking about killing these senescent cells, right? What we do is that we have these proteins that can downregulate all of the inflammatory messages coming from the senescent cells. So we're not senolytics, they're more xenomorphics. They're just affecting the inflammation instead of trying to kill the cells. So different strategies, different results. And they're not mutually exclusive. I think there could be a possible way that, our technologies could work together. So
I think it's actually even likely, it seems highly unlikely that one thing is going to solve everything across the board. Like that is not what we're going to be seeing. You're going to see a mix of technologies that, one thing like the exosomes can drive regeneration with a huge pleiotropic effect, like all the countless things that are inside those things that would be very difficult to ever achieve one at a time with any other kind of therapy. And I think that you're going to see mixes of these. It's going to be essential, I think.
I asked Matt earlier, or he gave me a very rational answer to where gene therapy will go.
Right.
But going back to superpowers, Yuta, when you look at where the market is going, and I'm sure there are startups that are now looking at gene therapy from looking at space, like the use cases for space and all that. But are there any that are that you're hearing about that you're like, oh wow, this is going to be a paradigm shift?
We were just talking about this earlier about using mRNA technology to personally design gene therapies to save babies that have these deficiencies. So Matt can probably talk more about that. I'm excited about the whole reprogramming field too. Beyond our own cell therapies, I think reprogramming, especially like OSK, to really drive cells back to an earlier state. I think it's incredible. So the background to that is quite simple. It's from Shinya Yamanaka. It's a Japanese researcher from Kyoto that published on the induced pluripotent stem cell in 2006. And he got the Nobel Prize like 2012, which is record breaking. And what he did was he took an adult cell and he used a virus to change 4 transcription factors to OSKM and was able to take that adult cell and turn it all the way back to a stem cell state, right? And what's incredible about that is if you can reprogram one cell from an adult back to a stem cell state, that means that it's possible now, theoretically possible, to reprogram every cell in your body to go back. It's just how far do you want to go back and how do you do it? So really it's just an engineering problem. And so that's what a lot of people are working on. And what I'm really excited about is, can we get that programming done in such a fashion that we can all maintain a body of a 24-year-old, for example? Then you can stave off a lot of diseases because you have the really healthy immune system. You have a really well-functioning body. And if we're able to get our cells to all stay in that state, we can live a very, very long time. And I think we're at the beginning stages of that. And so I applaud all the scientists and all the companies that are pushing in that field. I think it's going to change the world.
Matt, as we move forward, what is the one thing that you feel could go absolutely wrong?
That's a great question.
I guess coming from engineering and cybersecurity, like everything can go wrong. I mean, we know amazingly little about biology. You can fill buildings with papers about a cell or a pathway, but we don't fundamentally understand it. Like, this isn't when I came out of computer science initially, like every bug there was put there by you or your friends. It's a man-made system. With life, it's not. It's mind-bogglingly complex. And so I think it's very easy to perturb it in a way that's detrimental or lethal. And I mean, this is not unique to any of these new technologies. It's true of every drug development effort ever. I mean, certain plants, if you eat them, you die. Other ones are tasty and some have benefits. And so I think that, we'll, continue basically learning things empirically. And some of these tools like better AI going into this merging of kind of, I think, synthetic biology and gene therapy are kind of the future of medicine, but we fundamentally don't understand what we're messing with, and so there will always be consequences for that. But I don't think they're nearly as catastrophic as even other disciplines. I mean, no one's building the equivalent of an atomic bomb, with medicine. You're forced to kill one person at a time.
But like, this is interesting because actually, if you can modify very slightly everyone's genome, you could probably create a biologic that would wipe out the human species.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, at least it wipe out a lot of them, not all of them. But
which is pretty like, and I'm assuming it can be transmitted through a gas or something.
Well, I don't think that's practical. So I mean, I guess probably the most direct answer.
It's not practical.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure our listeners are feeling
well, here's
positive. No.
a funny thing. Like, I mean, one of the most toxic substances known to man is, botulism toxin. And people are still busily working to make a more toxic version of it that lasts longer in your face. I mean, you could wipe out all human life on Earth with enough botulism toxin you could hold in your hand. Yeah, like it's incredibly toxic. And so, but yeah, it's you'd have to, you can put it in the water supply, I guess, in that case. But you can't.
I think you're giving some ideas.
Historically, people dying from dented cans was botulism toxin. I think the biggest risk, if you're looking at buildings, would be like engineering a new kind of virus that was really nasty, or a new kind of living organism like bacteria or something that was really bad. Build the therapies themselves. I think, some could be harmful, like they could have unintended consequences, but they're not, meaningfully different than any other medical intervention that we've conjured up over the years. The idea of building viruses that are replication competent and modified is a very known threat. And I think you don't need these tools to do it, though. I mean, there's a paper that was published, and it was embargoed for a while, actually, a few years back, that was basically showing that with no real advanced technology, you could modify the influenza virus to be airborne and something like 80% lethal. And there was a big controversy about whether that paper should publish. And in the end, it did, but it doesn't require any of the tools that we're talking about. And so I think that on one hand, life is very resilient, there's a lot of diversity that confers survival under otherwise nasty circumstances. So wiping out everything has been hard even for viruses to do. And they have been fighting with life since life began. But I'd say engineering something like that is probably the worst thing one could do, or the thing you have the most caution about if you're messing with. But the therapies that we're talking about building for aging and stuff, I think some will work and some won't, but they're not likely to have any serious global consequences.
So we've got the stem cells that are making us feel like we're 24. And then we've got the gene therapies that are protecting us against global warming or whatever that it needs to be protected against or optimized for. It's interesting how the Overton window or the needle moves so quickly when there's a need. When you look at the next 5 years, Yuta, 2030, 2035, what do you think is going to move the needle furthest? And you said before you're an eternal optimist, and so am I.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
I think that low-hanging fruit. We have to solve some of these serious diseases that we're facing today. The biggest one being cancer, right? So I believe that we're on the trail for that, and probably in the next 10 years, we're really going to move the needle and move into solid tumors and get a lot of that stuff out of the way, and that will move the needle for longevity. Healthspan-wise, I think there are a lot of people working in parallel, including my company, to provide potential therapies that will make you literally biologically younger, right? So we just have to make that happen right now. So we're working on it, but very, very close. So stay alive.
Yeah. And you talked when we were previously on the show about seeing what your parents went through, and it's when you think about and cancer is, we talk so much about healthspan and the importance of reversing aging, because that reduces the four horsemen. It's 4 and it's not 5, is it? It's 4, right?
I can't
5
keep
horsemen,
track.
4 horsemen.
4 horsemen, yeah.
Okay, four horsemen.
Of the apocalypse, yeah.
What do you think ultimately? Because we talk about, it's really exciting for someone listening who's thinking, my parents, whoever has cancer, and I need that therapeutic now in my hand for them. Right. What do you think is ultimately going to, when we have the day where we say this is the end of cancer, what would the therapeutic have been, in your opinion? You
know what? I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. I personally do believe that there are many ways about this. We're going to have our strategy. A lot of different companies will have their strategies. And, this is why I'm very supportive of everybody trying. Because, as human beings, we tend to be extremely linear thinking. everybody's looking for a silver bullet, right? And so it's probably going to be a combination of a lot of these different technologies that are coming about. Partially gene, partially cell, partially exosomes coming from cells, or a combination thereof. And we don't know what that solution is right now. And so it's really hard to pin down and say, oh, it's got to be this way, right? And so in that way, I really do believe that everybody should be supported, and everybody needs to be optimistic about it. And in the next 10 years, when we keep building this and keep discovering what we don't know about our own biology, we're going to come to a critical mass and we'll solve it, right? So hard to give you a direct silver bullet answer, but that's the way I think.
There are approaches we can take that we probably never really fathomed before. I mean, I've been interested in giving myself super sleeper genes, so I could, like only sleep a few hours a night and not have any ill consequences for it, or taking the bowhead whale's DNA repair pathway to fix damage you cause, or traits of a bat's immune system. Like there's a lot of these things that they sound so crazy on one hand, but when you start looking at it's having the right tools for the job, right? Like flying was really crazy until somebody figured out how to fly, and the raw materials existed basically. And that's like this paradox I find probably one of the most interesting in the field is the one of an immortal germline with a mortal person. And Yuta was talking about in iPS cells that you can take the oldest egg you can find, a sperm that barely swims, and you put the two together and you get something that's 0 years old. Like all of the kind of sins of your life were erased and this thing resets to 0. And that means that somewhere written in our code is something to undo age, to reset it again. And I think being able to understand how the control logic of life works to manipulate these things will open up possibilities that we just couldn't imagine before. And that's kind of what excites me about this, that it's the fact that we know so little, and why go to conferences like this, you see every lab there is working on some amazing thing that I probably never would have thought of. And you get to see what happens when you can mix them together at events like this.
It is fascinating. This is, again, a paradigm shift in what you've just suggested, because we will get there in the next 100 years. I assume we will develop the ability to fly, to do whatever. Am I right? Am I right?
You're gonna look very different if you gain the ability to fly,
or something. But it's a paradigm shift.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to take 100 years though. It'll be less than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in 100 years, what it even means to be human is going to be different than what it means today. It's going to be a massive shift in 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Yuta, one of the biggest, let's say, pushbacks to any of this stuff is always the us versus them. It's you. If we can't have it, you can't.
Right.
And so, do you think this is something? And then there's the religious argument as well.
Sure.
Are we messing around too much? It's going to cause a lot of friction. Or do you think actually, people will be like, no, there's benefit in this. We can all fly, or we can all have incredible immune systems, or we can all just sleep 2 hours a night and watch Netflix and go straight in, or have Brian Johnson's Midnight Erections.
You're probably going to get an answer from, a different answer from different people from different parts of the spectrum of life, right? But I do believe in one singular goal that we all have, is to be healthy and to be alive. It's that simple. Whether or not you can fly or see 100 miles out, or swim underwater for an hour, these are all additions. And I think that we should just push to do one thing first, which is stay alive. That's extremely important. Right. And I really do believe that we're very close to getting that done, which whatever strategy that's going to come to. And so everybody keep pushing, because we're going to get there very, very soon. And then we can start adding the cool stuff. So
I've learned, I'm just going to put out there, I've learned so much from this, because I often thought when we solve aging and longevity escape velocity, what the hell do we do next? But the idea with how far the needle is going to move on the human experience with gene therapy, it's just fascinating how far we can go and how we can elevate everyone's experience. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, guys. It's been a fascinating dive.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
If you want to know what tomorrow has in store like I do, you definitely want to listen to our recent episode where I talked to Peter Diamandis about a future where we could live forever. Thank you so much.